Hi everyone. In this video, we are continuing our discussion on classes, object, and object-oriented programming in Java. In the last session, we covered how to create classes and objects and introduce the concept of methods. Today, we'll dive deeper into the types of methods, concept of blocks, and constructors in Java. Let's get started. First, let's talk about blocks. A block in Java is simply any code enclosed in curly braces. Code written inside these braces forms a block, and the code within the block gets executed together. Blocks can serve different purposes depending on whether they are placed and where they are placed. When a block appears inside a method, it is called method block. When it is outside any method, it is instance initializer block. And if they appear in loops, they are called loop blocks. If we would have seen while loop, or if we would have seen for loop, we would have seen that we are using the braces. So they are loop block when they appear in while loop or for loops. Instance initializer blocks allows you to initialize variable in a unique way, and they run each time an object is created. Now let's move on to methods. Methods define the action and behavior that an object can perform. The basic syntax for method includes return type, whether they are void or if they're going to return any specific type. That could be int, string, char, other types, followed by method name and the parameters that it can take. There are two main types of method in Java. Methods with return type will return the value. For example, if you will have a method called int add, and if it will take two numbers inside, then the return type will be sum of the two numbers. So it is also going to return you type integer. Similarly, methods without a return type. These use void keyword because they do not return anything. It could be like a message that is displaying a message, which is just printing out some statement inside your method. So there is another concept called method overloading that will get tied up with methods, but we'll see about method overloading when we are trying to explore polymorphism. And then we have the main method. The main method is a special method in Java. It's entry point for Java application where execution begins. So if you look at the example that I have here, which has a class called car, it has constructor there, it has a method inside, and it has this public static void main method. Now this method is a special method, like I said earlier. The main method will never return any value and takes an array of strings as a parameter. This array can store command line arguments that we pass when we start a Java program. Since it is static, the JVM can call it without creating an instance of class. Finally, what we have is constructors. A constructor is also a special type of method. In a class, they are used to initialize objects. It is called when an object of a class is created. For example, anytime you're creating an object, the moment you type your keyword and then when you will call your class name followed by the parenthesis, which is a method basically, which is a constructor method whose name is same as that of your class name. There are two types of constructor. The constructors that are default constructors. These are provided by Java even if you don't create one. It sets default values for all the variable. And there is parameterized constructor. This is the one you will define to initialize objects to specific values. So that's about the theory of block, methods, and constructors. Let's see how they work to see the blocks, methods, and constructors specifically in this programming session. I will start with adding some variables first, which is my instance variable. I'm going to have a variable called string and we'll assign it value Alice. I'm going to have a block. Inside my block, I'm going to print the variable Alice. The variable name is going to print me the value Alice. So let's call our main method. So inside my main method, I have my code block. I'm going to create an object. So in order to execute your blocks, you don't really have to create a reference variable to call the blocks because they don't really have any name to refer them. So just creating an object will call your blocks. And when you try to run this, you will be able to print your value from the block. So this is your block demonstration followed by let's create a method. So like we discussed, our method has return type. First it follows by access modifier, which could be public. I'll create public as my access modifier. I'm going to create a void method first. So this is my void method and it is going to do display. So let's put some value inside, which is going to print me hi. And now let's create next method, which is going to be having some return type. This method is going to be private and I'll use type string and the method name is print. So this method is going to return hello world. Since this is of string type, I'm returning a string as my value. So when I'll be calling this method, it will return me the value called hello world. So I'm going to create a reference variable to call these methods so that the program looks neat. So let's copy the class name, code block, code equals to the object. Now I'm going to call code dot operator and call the method display, and next you can call code dot print text, but whenever you call the print text it is going to return a value, so you will have to declare a string called message value so that you save that value inside a new string and try to print it here. Now you can print this message value that you are passing via the message in the print text method. Now let's run this. So if you look at the order of execution, I'm creating an object. After I create an object, I'm calling my display method, which is hi, and print text, which is hello world. But if you look at it, my first method that is getting called is the blocks. Blocks has the higher precedence in the execution here, so they are getting executed here first. Similarly, there is another type of block which is called static block. When they are there, then they get the higher precedence. So even though I put this one first here, and then I have my static block. So inside my static block, I'm going to print something else. And if you look at it, this name is outside of this class, which is an instance variable. You will not be able to refer your instance variable of the class in the static block because instance variable can be referred with the object, but static block content will not be referred with the object. So you will have to have your own static variable, or you can declare this variable as static. So I'm creating my own static variable inside the block so that I don't get any compiler error. Now when I'll try to run this, block gets called the moment I'm creating the object. But this block will get called even before I create the object by the time the class is loading. Let's run and show the demonstration. I will make this name different, Alex static. So we are seeing the demonstration of how the blocks gets executed and how the static block will execute, and we see the void method, and we are also seeing the return type method, meaning you have string type method which is returning a string and we are printing the message as well, and then we'll finally see our constructor. Now these are all our different types of methods, or I can say different types of blocks that will help you to execute your functionality in an organized way or in the sequence that you wanted your program to execute. So your constructors are methods with same name as that of your class name. So pick the class name using public keyword. This is my first constructor, and inside that, when the constructor is going to be called, I wanted to print constructor is called. So as soon as your code enters this method in your main class, this is going to be called. Now I'm also going to create a parameterized constructor. I'll use int number, and now I will append that number here. Now if you see, this is my class constructor, which is code block, and this is my second constructor, which is parameterized constructor. It is also having same name as that of your code block. Your compiler will recognize this method only when you pass a value of number to the constructor. If you don't pass it, this will get ignored. So I'm going to, now we already have this first constructor getting called because we are creating an object. So I'm going to run this. I'm going to see the first constructor is going to be printed here. If you look at it, the order of sequence is still same. Your static block gets executed first, followed by your this block, and then your constructor is getting called, and then the other two methods are getting called. So even though here it looks like your constructors are getting called first, so which is your third line here. First is your static block, second is your block, normal block, and third is your constructor, and then the methods. So in order to call your parameterized constructor, now this behavior of having the same method name, if you look at it, these are all special type of methods still. So they have same method name, but their behavior is different, which will be called as constructor overloading. Let me call that thing. I'm going to create a different object. So in this, I'm going to pass 5. Let's run this. So your constructor 2 is called and the 5 is appended. And each time your constructor is getting called, this Alice is getting loaded. This block is getting loaded, if you see, and the static block is loaded only once, but this block is getting loaded every time you're creating the new objects. That is something to be noted. So this is the demonstration for what are your blocks and what are methods and the types of methods, which can be void method or can be return type method and constructors and parameterized constructor, and we also see the order of precedence of how these blocks are getting executed. And finally, let's not ignore the fact that when you look at this main method, even this is also a method, one could wonder like, why am I not creating an object to call this method? If you look at it as having this keyword called static, anytime you encounter the static keyword, you're basically not creating any object to call that particular method. This method is getting called by the JVM, so that the JVM, while it is loading, it will look for the main method. JVM itself is going to call this method, so that you don't have to create a specific class or an object to call this thing. JVM is doing that job for us due to this static keyword. So that's it for this segment. Thanks for watching. Bye.